My husband and I lived together without living with either set of parents. My mother-in-law seemed to dislike me and has harassed me many times in the past. I've been furious with her multiple times, but I endured it because we weren't living together. However, one day she fell down the stairs and fractured her leg. My husband Hans asked me to help her with her daily activities. Her house is about an hour away from ours. To be honest, looking back on what happened before, I really didn't want to go help her, even though she was injured. But if I refused, I would probably hear complaints from both Hans and Anne, so I reluctantly agreed to help. I promptly contacted her, and when I arrived at her house, I rang the doorbell. "Yeah, can you wait a bit?" That was Anne's response, but even after waiting for about 20 minutes, she didn't come out. Considering she was injured, I thought maybe something had happened, and I said, "Anne, I'm sorry. Are you okay? I'm coming in." As I entered, I saw her lying in front of the TV, watching a talk show and laughing uproariously with snacks in hand. I was furious, but I knew getting angry would only play into her hands, even though she was the one who told me to wait. Is this harassment? This is beyond lacking common sense. I need to finish my errands here quickly and go home, I thought, keeping my composure and saying with a disgustingly fake smile, "Anne, how are you feeling?" "What can I help with first?" she responded nonchalantly. "What? You won't do anything unless I ask? Oh, you don't usually do housework, do you? Well, it's not surprising you don't know then. My son is unlucky to have a wife like you. Clean up quickly and leave, please." I couldn't believe she had the nerve to say that to me, who had come all this way to help her. She can't speak without being sarcastic. I really don't understand why she is so malicious. Ignoring Anne's sarcasm, I began cleaning the rooms and doing laundry. Looking around, the living room where she was lying down and all other rooms were cluttered with stuff scattered everywhere, leaving no place to step. I couldn't believe she had the audacity to critique my housekeeping in such a mess. Nevertheless, I cleaned tirelessly, trying to maintain a neutral state of mind. After finishing cleaning and laundry, I took out the meals I had prepared and brought them in containers. Eager to return home as soon as possible, I had prepared them since the night before. "Anne, I've prepared these meals for you. Please warm them up and eat," I called out to her. She sluggishly emerged from the living room to the kitchen and said, "Thanks for going to the trouble. But what a shame. All the dishes are things I hate. Can't you cook at all? You really can't do anything, can you? Fine. It's not your fault that you can't cook. But I can't eat these, so go buy some ready-made dishes from the supermarket right now. And since it's your fault, you'll cover the bill." Earlier, while cleaning, I noticed that the kitchen was strewn with remnants of instant noodles in takeout containers, and the refrigerator contained nothing resembling ingredients except for alcohol and beverages. She probably doesn't cook proper meals normally. I remember Hans telling me soon after we started dating and began living together that his mother never did housework or cooked. Her meals consisted of ready-made or frozen foods, essentially anything that didn't require cooking. Hans was very surprised when I first served him a homemade meal. "This is the first time I've had a meal like this. So, you can actually make dishes at home, huh?" I remember him saying something like that. I bought the requested ready-made dishes at the supermarket and returned to Anne's house. "You're late. Where on earth did you go shopping?" "Let me guess, you deliberately took your time hoping I would starve because I scolded you? Or did you plan to spoil the food you bought by taking your time coming back?" The moment I opened the front door, I was met with such a verbal onslaught from her, leaving me dumbfounded. What is she talking about? As I thought this and continued to scream hysterically, not listening to anything I said and becoming increasingly heated up. Shifting the direction of her rant, accusing me of stealing Hans from her and going on with no sign of stopping. Even I have my limits. This is beyond unreasonable. And stop the false accusations. Please calm down. It's not good for your injury, I said, restraining myself, but with a slightly raised voice. Perhaps surprised by my loud voice, she seemed to calm down momentarily, but suddenly, with a loud slap, her wrinkled hand forcefully struck my cheek. Ouch! Moreover, her dirty long nails scratched me, causing blood to ooze from my cheek. Shocked by the sudden slap, I fell to the ground. I felt a terrible pain in my left wrist, which had taken an awkward position in the fall. "It's your fault. Just go home, you bringer of bad luck." She seemed to realize she had gone too far, but instead of helping me up, she forcibly dragged me and threw me out of the front door. The uneasy sensation in my left wrist and the throbbing pain intensified with time, swelling abnormally and losing sensation. I think it might be best to go to the hospital. At this time, Hans must be on his way home. I'll try to get in touch and ask him to come. I thought of doing so, but when I tried calling, it was busy and I couldn't get through. Reluctantly, I started walking towards the station and was waiting for the train at the platform when I finally received a call back from him. On the phone, I explained the situation to him and asked if he could take me to the hospital. But he shouted, "What the hell have you done to my mom? She was crying, you know? You didn't help out properly and settled for cold supermarket dinners, did you? She's injured and needs to maintain her nutrition. Why can't you be more considerate?" I guess the reason his phone was busy earlier was because he was on a call with Anne. But it's not just her feeding Hans lies, but he's not doubting her stories at all. Even when I said I might have broken a bone, I couldn't believe him anymore. I had suspected that he was a mama's boy for a while now, but since he was raised by her alone, I thought I had to let some things slide. I used to think I needed to be more forgiving, but this time it's too much. I've reached my limit with him. I understand now. If you can't believe me, that's fine. I will never help again. And regarding moving in with her, which you've mentioned before, it's absolutely not an option. If you still insist on living with her, I think divorce is the only option. Please, enough is enough. I will be going back to my parents' house today, so you should seriously think about this at home. With that, I hung up the phone. I couldn't believe it. Feeling that nothing I say would get through to him now, I decided to go back to my parents' home. I called my mom and told her everything that happened today, and she immediately accompanied me to the hospital. After getting examined, it turned out there was a fracture in my left wrist. I was fortunate it wasn't my dominant hand. I received some painkillers, and as I was about to leave the examination room, my mom stopped me. "This is too much," she said. "Your dad and I talked, and think you should get a medical report from the doctor just in case. We believe you're not lying. As much as we don't want to say this, if you were hurt to this extent, we can't stay silent. That woman has been calling our house repeatedly, criticizing your upbringing and complaining about your housekeeping. She's been nagging constantly. We kept quiet, thinking it was for your sake, but this is just too much, isn't it? You should rethink your future after this incident. You can come back home anytime." The words my mom said with tears in her eyes struck a chord with me. I didn't know. My mom had been tolerating so much and had been harassing my family home as well. It was unbelievable, yet she lied to attract Hans' attention, and he swallowed her false stories whole, treating me as the bad person. My affection for him cooled rapidly. There's no reason for me to cling to them anymore after being treated like this, right? That day I spent a relaxing time at my parents' home for the first time in a while. Today had been filled with various events, but thanks to my warm parents, I slept soundly. The next day, I decided to go back to our house to pick up my belongings. My mom offered to come with me, but I said it was okay. However, when I asked if I could come back after packing, she said I could come back anytime. After packing, she gave me a big smile and said, "Of course." When I arrived at our house, the door was unlocked. That's right. Today is indeed Hans' day off. But it couldn't be helped. I thought so as I entered the house. Noticing him in the living room, I passed by and started packing my things in our bedroom. Then I felt a presence behind me. Turning around, there stood Hans. He was holding out a completed divorce paper, already filled and stamped, right in front of my face. "I can't forgive you for treating my mom that way," he said. "If you refuse to live with her, divorce is the only option, right? If you want to apologize, do it now." With a triumphant expression, he seemed to urge me to apologize quickly as he thrust the divorce papers towards me. I really couldn't believe it anymore. The painkillers must have worn off, because my left wrist started throbbing. I understand. I will think about it too, but for now, I'm going back to my parents' home. When I conveyed this, seemingly unexpectedly, he retorted somewhat resentfully. Even though you are entirely at fault, what? Backfiring at me? Fine. Do as you please with the divorce papers. But if you're going to apologize, do it now. What will it be? He probably filled out the divorce papers as a threat to use against me. As proof, his hand was slightly trembling and his eyes were darting around. This is a good opportunity, I thought to myself. I understand. Saying so, I took the divorce papers, grabbed my belongings, and left the house. It hadn't even been 2 years since we got married. The wounds were still shallow, but I knew I could start over from here. I inserted the house keys into the mailbox and headed back to my parents' home. The furniture in our home was something we bought together when we first got married. Of course, I no longer needed such things, and I thought he could do as he pleased with them. Hans was the one managing the finances in our household, and he only handed over money for groceries to me. I wasn't expecting anything in terms of asset division. I bet he wasn't saving anything either. I resigned when we got married, thinking I could find a job quickly. Since I was originally a dietitian, it's funny how everyone always said I couldn't cook even though I was a nutritionist, isn't it? Isn't it? On my way back home, I stopped by the city hall and swiftly filled out my section of the divorce papers, stamped them, and filed for divorce right away. I hope there are no errors. And thankfully our divorce application was accepted. When I arrived home, my parents were indeed surprised that I had already filed the divorce papers. But my dad gently patted my shoulder and said it was for the best. I couldn't stop crying. Just then the home phone rang. I had a bad feeling. When my mother answered, it was Hans on the phone. She told him I wasn't home at the moment, and listened to what he had to say. I know you don't really want a divorce, so I am willing to forgive you now. Let's go apologize to my mother together. I can overlook what happened this time. My mother relayed his message to me in a way that I could easily understand. Then suddenly, my normally calm father raised his voice in anger at what he was hearing. What do you mean forgive you? Our daughter was seriously injured by your mother. And now you want us to go apologize to her? Stop kidding around. It's undeniably your mother's fault that she got hurt. We even have a medical report to prove it. We can even report this to the police if necessary. Besides, you're being way too familiar and bossy with us now, but remember, you are no longer a part of this family. If you contact my daughter unnecessarily or harass her again, be prepared for us to consult with the police, including filing a report. Hans seemed to be quite shaken by those words. Wait a minute. What do you mean, father-in-law? You really are a blockhead, just like your mother, aren't you? The divorce has already been finalized. But since you agreed to it, there shouldn't be any complaints, right? No way. There is nothing more to discuss with you. Ignoring whatever he was trying to say next, my father hung up the phone with a loud click. It was the first time I had seen my father so furious, but seeing him put Hans in his place felt quite right. Felt quite refreshing, to be honest. Later, Hans stormed into the city hall, demanding the divorce to be cancelled, claiming it was orchestrated by me alone, which turned into a police matter. Then he barged into our house, but my mother handled him. Perhaps venting years of built-up frustration, she thoroughly argued with him and sent him away. It seemed like a form of vengeance for my mother, finally being able to stand up to him. This way I was able to cleanly cut ties with those two. Now I have started a new job and am enjoying fulfilling days. Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. If you resonated with the content, please leave a positive rating and a comment. My name is Angela. I'm a 33-year-old housewife. It's been a year since we got married, but we still don't have any children. My husband, Cecil, loves kids and was eager to start a family ever since we got married, often saying, let's have a child soon. However, we've been waiting for the stork to come. Running out of patience, Cecil suggested, why don't you see a doctor? I went to an obstetrician and gynecologist. After many tests, the doctor told me, there's nothing wrong. Just when I was feeling relieved, Cecil suddenly declared, I'm sorry. I want a divorce. Why? I asked. There's nothing wrong with my body. I really want a child soon. I can't bear the uncertainty of when or if we'll have one if we continue like this. I was speechless. It's only been a year since we got married. It's proven that I can conceive. Can't you wait a little longer? But Angela, you're already 33. You'll become an old woman while we wait. Maybe you're already old. I want our child to have a young and beautiful mother. What does that even mean? I thought, does he think of me as some kind of object? It felt like a knife piercing deep into my heart. But I love Cecil. I desperately tried to persuade him not to go through with the divorce. However, I couldn't change Cecil's mind, and we parted ways after just a year. I was so devastated that I couldn't think straight, but as time went on, I began to understand Cecil's true nature. He didn't love me as much as I thought. Maybe he only saw me as a tool to have a child. This belief turned into a certainty 2 years later. I heard from my friend Elma that Cecil was having a shotgun wedding with his new girlfriend. Elma has been my best friend since our school days, and by coincidence, she worked at the same company as Cecil. So she's a mutual friend of both Cecil and me. With her straightforward personality, she's popular among both men and women. Relying on that, it seems Cecil consults her about everything. It seems he had an affair with his current wife, Angela, even when they were married. What? You mean he was cheating on me? That's right. He blamed me for not being able to have children, while he sneakily spent time with another woman. Elma placed her coffee cup down abruptly and stared at me. Don't waste your time on a guy like that, Angela. Find someone new. Encouraged by her words, I finally found closure. A year later, I was set to remarry. After my divorce, I had been working part-time at a call center. That's where I met Felix, who was 2 years older than me, and we started dating. About 6 months into our relationship, he proposed. I'm so happy, but you don't think I'm good enough? It's not that. I might have difficulty getting pregnant. What do you mean? When I explained the circumstances surrounding my divorce with my ex-husband, Felix laughed it off, saying, "Oh, is that all? The doctor told me there's no problem with me, Angela. Besides, conceiving is a challenge that a couple should face and work on together. Stop thinking as if it's solely your responsibility." Upon hearing that, tears involuntarily spilled from my eyes. Even if, and it's a big if, we can't have children, we'll just walk through life together, just the two of us. I'll never forget the warmth of Felix, who hugged me as he said this. After remarrying, I was truly happy. Felix was good at household chores, handling everything on his own, because I lived alone for a long time. But thanks to that, I was able to meet you, Angela. I'm grateful to God. He'd say, his face blushing with a shy smile. It was so endearing. He was also a great cook, often preparing genuine Italian dishes for me. Cecil wouldn't even take out the trash, and I had assumed that's just how men were. Everything with Felix was a pleasant surprise. I must have truly felt fulfilled. Then, half a year after our marriage, I discovered that I was pregnant. During my regular gynecological checkup, I was congratulated with the words, "Congratulations." Still in disbelief, I went home and waited to break the news to Felix when he returned from work. "Really? That's awesome, Angela." Suddenly, he picked me up by the waist, catching me off guard. "Hey, stop it, Felix. Sorry. The baby must have been startled." Rushing to put me down, he gently stroked my stomach. "I'm glad you're happy. Course. It's our child, Angela." Seeing Felix's eyes turn bright red, I felt like crying too. "It's thanks to you, Felix. Being with you, I felt such peace in my heart. That's why I think I was able to get pregnant. Take care of yourself, okay? Absolutely no overdoing it." Yeah, I understand. The next 10 months felt like a dream. I barely experienced any morning sickness, and once I entered the stable period, it was so much fun to go shopping with Felix and pick out various baby items. As the due date approached, just a week away, my smartphone rang. It was from Cecil. I hesitated for a moment, but then pressed the call button. "Hello? Oh, Angela? It's me. Yeah, it's been a while. You know, I heard from Alma that you're pregnant." "Is it true?" "It is. Why?" "I always thought you couldn't get pregnant." At this point, I was speechless. Maybe I should have been patient a bit longer. Cecil joked in very poor taste. "I don't need your patience. Thank you. By the way, are things going well with your new wife?" "Huh? What? What are you talking about?" He feigned ignorance. "Well, either way, it's no longer any of my business. Goodbye." I hung up, my voice sharp as a knife. I wondered about the purpose of his call as I told Felix about it when he came home from work. We didn't divorce out of hatred, But him suddenly calling like that just feels so unsettling. Maybe he had a fight with his current wife? Maybe he wanted someone to vent to? It didn't seem like that. He even said something as rude as, maybe I should have been more patient. Maybe he wanted to celebrate your pregnancy? There's no way. Honestly, Felix, you're too kind-hearted. Felix, laughing gently, is truly a kind soul. Having him in front of me made being angry feel foolish, and the conversation shifted to our baby. The baby is a girl. The doctor told us during the last checkup. That day we discussed potential names for her again. Felix's eyes sparkled with joy. I can't wait to meet her. It will be soon. Exactly a week later, our baby was born. We named her Hilda. Felix, holding Hilda, tearfully repeated, thank you to me over and over again. After being discharged from the hospital, I faced the challenges of childcare every day. Of course, Felix helps out, but both of us are inexperienced, leading to a series of mistakes. It would be great to have reliable grandparents to help out during times like this. We can't help it. Both of our families live far away. You know, Angela, you could have gone back to your parents for some time, Felix suggested. It's okay. No matter how hard it gets, I want to be here with you and Hilda, I replied. Though many sleepless nights from Hilda's crying left us exhausted, just looking at her face healed our weariness. After 3 months, when we started to give Hilda half formula and half breast milk, we finally began to sleep peacefully. One day, Elma came over with a gift to celebrate Hilda's birth. Wow, she's adorable. Looking at Hilda sleeping in her crib, Elma squealed softly. Congratulations, Angela. Thank you. I'm so glad you came. I intended to come sooner. Sorry about that. Don't be. I know you're busy with work, and I'm just grateful you could make time for us. I served the cake and coffee that Elma had brought as gifts, and we sat facing each other. The conversation was lively with stories about Hilda, and as I was pouring our second cup of coffee, Elma began, You know, you're so happy now, Angela. And I hesitated to bring this up, but can you listen? What is it? Why so formal? Yeah, it's about Cecil. You know, he and his current wife had a child soon after they got married, right? Because of that, he seemed to think that the infertility issue back then was certainly because of you, Angela. I figured as much, but after he found out you were pregnant, he seemed to reconsider. He began wondering if there was something wrong with his own body. It wasn't so much the better late than never sentiment I felt, but rather genuine curiosity about Cecil's health. But Cecil had a child, right? So what's the issue? That man is such a fool. He's been blaming his wife, saying things like, the child isn't mine, and whose seed did you take in? Elma looked absolutely flabbergasted. What the heck? Isn't that a bit of a stretch? When she consulted me, I thought he was a real idiot. So Cecil himself was seriously troubled by this. Seems like it. Still, Elma seemed to have consoled Cecil. And guess what he said next? Her promiscuous nature hasn't changed. I can't trust anyone. From the guy who's saying it that's rich. Putting aside his own issues, it's astonishing how he can so blatantly accuse others. Both Elma and I were utterly astounded. They had a massive argument and she returned to her parents' home. That's to be expected. He came to me crying, asking for advice, but I just yelled back at him as if I would know or care. I couldn't help but laugh, imagining how Cecil must have looked when Elma shouted at him. Anyway, there's turmoil in Cecil's household, so I'm worried he might say something unnecessary to you, Angela. I'll be fine, I'm sure. He's no longer any concern of mine. Yeah, I know. But he's not thinking straight right now. Looking at Elma, who genuinely seemed concerned, I realized how kind-hearted she was. I'll block Cecil's calls. That's a good idea. I'll also make sure to sternly warn him not to contact you. Just then, we heard the cry of Hilda as she woke up from her nap. I got up and picked Hilda up. Can I hold her too? Elma asked, holding out her arms. As we both comforted Hilda, the thoughts of Cecil completely faded from my mind. A month passed and I was engrossed in my busy day-to-day childcare. There was no contact from Cecil. However, suddenly Cecil's wife came over with their child. She said she got our address from her mother-in-law. I had informed the in-laws of our whereabouts just in case. Rachel, as Cecil's wife introduced herself, seemed to be in her 20s, and she was a lovely person with striking big eyes. Her son, Tom, who was almost 2 years old, looked just like Rachel. We sat facing each other on the sofa. Tom was intently playing with my daughter, who was lying down. "I'm sorry for this sudden visit." "I really wanted to apologize to you, Angela," Rachel started. "Apologize?" "Yes, I was dating Cecil without knowing he was already married. I truly regret that things turned out this way." I was honestly taken aback when she bowed her head in apology. To be apologized to at this point was unsettling. "You came all the way here just to say that?" I asked. "Well, yes, we've decided to divorce," Rachel admitted. "With Cecil. It has nothing to do with you, Angela, but I really wanted to talk, so I came here." Rachel began to speak as if a dam had burst. Her story was full of shocks. He constantly accused me, saying that the child wasn't his, so I decided I'll show you the proof and had a DNA test done to confirm Cecil was indeed the father. So wasn't the problem resolved then? It wasn't. Even though he kept saying things like, "You're still tainted and I only married you because you can have kids," the moment the DNA test confirmed it, he changed his tune to, "Oh, what a relief. Now we can happily have a second child." Can you believe that? Rachel's anger was palpable. It's true, I might have been the other woman, but Cecil was the one who deceived me. Rachel slammed the table hard. "Hey, calm down. The children will get scared." "I'm sorry." Regaining her composure, Rachel lowered her head. "So you decided on the divorce?" "Yes. He sees his wife merely as a tool to have children. It doesn't matter to him who the other person is." I could relate to that feeling all too well. After all, I had felt the same way. If you were to ask if I resented the Rachel in front of me, perhaps I might. However, the child is undoubtedly innocent. Watching the children playing happily, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pity. Fortunately, Cecil's parents have taken my side. They are so fed up with his foolishness that they banned him from coming to their house. His parents are good people, aren't they? Exactly. With such wonderful parents, how could they produce such a scumbag? We looked at each other and burst out laughing. Cecil's been whining about wanting custody, but of course I won't hand it over. If he causes any more trouble, my in-laws have told me they'll hire a lawyer. So, Rachel, what are you planning to do next? I'm going back to my parents' home and will look for a job. Yeah, hang in there. Thank you. I thought you, Angela, would understand how I feel, which is why I came. And I was worried that idiot might pick a fight with you over something. Please be careful. In this strange bonding moment, I had lost any desire to blame Rachel. We both have terrible judgment when it comes to men, huh? Not at all. Angela, you found yourself a wonderful husband now. You still have a bright future ahead of you, Rachel. With a broad smile on her face, Rachel left. While we might never see each other again, I genuinely wished her happiness. It was a month later that I heard from Elma that Cecil and Rachel's divorce had been finalized. I had changed my phone, so there was no contact from Cecil. However, I heard that Cecil still tells people around him that I was the cause of their divorce. What a spineless man. He's still going on about how there wouldn't have been any issues if you had gotten pregnant quickly. Elma raged on the other end of the call. I got so angry that I gave him a piece of my mind in front of everyone. What did you do? I decided to transfer him to a subsidiary company. Elma was Cecil's superior. She was highly competent and had risen to the rank of department head in Cecil's division. Isn't that an abuse of power? A woman's enemy is the enemy of society. While hearing Elma laugh over the phone, I murmured, "Poor Cecil. There's nothing wrong with wanting children." However, men who view women merely as tools for reproduction don't deserve to navigate the modern world. Receiving severe reprimands from both his wife and boss, pitiful Cecil still seems to hold on to his misogynistic views. Rumors have it that even in his new post, he's overstepped boundaries with women and faced consequences. Some people never learn. Maybe it's time for the Lord of Hell to give him a lesson he won't forget. Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. Please leave a positive rating and a comment. If you can't give me a grandchild, then get a divorce. Fine, I got it. I am pregnant though. I am Anne.
A homemaker in my 30s, living with my husband Jones, who's an office worker. I met Jones when I was working at a company related to the food industry. Over time, as we spoke many times regarding transactions, I found myself falling for his occasional smiles. So, I took the initiative and proposed a relationship. When I proposed, he rejected me, saying, "I'm sorry, I'm glad for your feelings, but I already have a girlfriend." However, a month later, he approached me saying, "I broke up with my girlfriend. I would like to be with you." Apparently, since the time I confessed to him, he started to think about me, and his girlfriend, sensing this change, asked, "Did you find someone else you like?" Upon him nodding, they agreed to part ways when she suggested, "Shall we break up then?" That's what I heard. I felt guilty for causing their breakup, but he reassured me with a smile. "Don't worry about it. It probably wouldn't have lasted long anyway." Saved by his kindness, after a relationship of 3 years, we got married. At that time, Jones had said, "I want to have children after we get married, and for that, could you stay at home and support me and the children?" Back then, I wasn't keen on continuing my job at a somewhat toxic company. So, as per his suggestion, I quit my job to become a full-time homemaker. I chose to support him. Transitioning suddenly from a working woman to a homemaker was harder than I thought, with many confusing moments. But it didn't bother me, because our newlywed life was sailing smoothly and I was constantly at the pinnacle of happiness. Every day was fun and happy. Moreover, the absence of any mother-in-law issues was a great factor. Jones's family home is just a 10-minute walk from our apartment. Initially, I was worried that they might frequently visit and hassle me, but those fears were unfounded. His parents were very kind. Even when I just asked a small question, they would come all the way to our home to explain it to me gently and kindly. And they never complained about our childlessness, even saying, "To me, you are even dearer than a grandchild. We only have men in our family, but I always wanted a daughter. Daughter, please let us pamper you like our real daughter." I was very fond of his mother, Carol, and though he was a man of few words, I trusted his reliable father, Tom, very much. But such a heartwarming relationship lasted only for the first few years. A few years into our marriage, the attitude of his once kind parents began to change gradually. Tom became even more reticent, and Carol had changed so much that I suspected her of having a dual personality. No, perhaps this is her true self. To quantify her change, if she was at +100 before, now she was at -100. Maybe. That's how harsh she had become towards me. Living nearby, she started visiting our house frequently, nagging me in Joan's absence, repeatedly urging me to show me the face of my grandchild soon. That's a wife's duty, isn't it? And rushing me to have a child.
A while ago, she used to say children are a gift from heaven. You don't have to try hard, you'll conceive naturally when the time comes. So don't rush. Furthermore, Carol began to pressure me by citing other families, saying things like, "The family over there recently had a baby. The woman next door is also pregnant. And what about you?" But no matter how much she pressed me for a grandchild, it was meaningless if Jones wasn't ready. At the beginning of our marriage, he did say he wanted children, but a year into our marriage, he had completely lost interest. Even when I tried to initiate, he would decline, saying, "I'm tired, maybe next time," or "Don't interrupt my gaming." Even when I told Carol about this, she didn't seem to understand and kept pressuring me about having a child, increasing my stress day by day. Unable to endure her attacks any longer, I confided in Jones about the pressure I was receiving from her to have a grandchild. Then he said with a grumble, "I don't think we need to rush this, but agreed to increase our intimate time together as much as possible. Despite our joint efforts as a couple, getting pregnant seemed elusive. Moreover, throughout this time, Carol kept hurling insults at us, saying things like, "You're not fulfilling your duty as a wife by not having a child," or "Right, other families are having children. Why can't you? It's because you're not trying hard enough." My son is not to blame at all. At times, I suspected that the accumulated stress caused by her might be making it harder to conceive. Unable to withstand the pressure from her anymore, we as a couple finally decided to undergo fertility treatments. I thought I could breathe a sigh of relief, but now I'm faced with a new problem that is tormenting me. It's about Jones. Since we started the fertility treatment, he began to act cold towards me, increasingly retreating to his room to play video games as soon as he returned home from work, and ignoring me when I tried to talk to him. If it were just that, it might have been tolerable. However, Jones became even more irritable, flying off the handle over my spending a little money on craft supplies for my hobby and taking out his work stress on me. Whenever I tried to argue back, he would quickly lose his temper, constantly saying one-sided things like, "Who do you think is providing for you, you freeloader?" and repeating his selfish behavior. No matter how many times I told him that I quit my job because of his wishes, he wouldn't listen. One day, when Jones should have been going to work, he was playing video games at home. When I asked him, "Aren't you gonna work?" he simply replied, "I quit." He had quit his job without telling me anything. Shocked, I inquired about the reason, but all he did was lose his temper, saying, "It's none of your business." I was disgusted by his uncooperative attitude, but I thought there was nothing I could do since he had already quit. I wasn't panicked about the money, thinking that we could manage somehow by relying on unemployment benefits and dipping into our home savings for a while. However, the prospect of him having no intention to find a new job began to stress me out. Jones, having quit his job, now spent his days at home from morning to evening. I wished he would go out once in a while, but gaming was his only hobby. Apart from going to the convenience store to buy cigarettes, he was constantly playing games at home. Compared to when he was a working man, the time we spent face-to-face as a couple increased dramatically. In the early days of our relationship, we spent much more time together. I would have taken this as an opportunity for more affectionate moments, but not anymore. The increase in face-to-face time with him, who had gone from +100 to -100, just like Carol, meant that our arguments as a couple were also on the rise. Gradually, we realized that even just talking to each other was becoming stressful, and we stopped conversing almost entirely. I wonder if there's any point in continuing this married life. I began to feel that this marriage was reaching its limit. I started thinking about finding a way to escape the current situation. One day, finally fed up with Jones loafing around playing games at home all day like a child, I told him, "You're not a kid. Stop playing games all the time and start looking for a job." To which he responded, "Oh, by the way, my mom told me that if we can't have a baby, we should get a divorce." That's when I found myself feeling grateful to Carol, something I never expected. After all, I am pregnant. I found out during a checkup today and had planned to tell him tonight, but it seems it was the right decision not to tell him. Now I can get away from both Carol and Jones. I said, "Okay, got it. Here are the divorce papers." Pulling out the already filled-out divorce papers from a drawer and handing them to him. Perhaps not expecting me to agree to the divorce, let alone produce ready-to-sign papers, he was taken aback, stuttering, "Huh?" and freezing on the spot. His usual domineering attitude was nowhere to be seen. He looked dumbfounded. Seeing my face, Jones seemed to want to say something, but convinced that he couldn't disregard what his mother said, he went ahead and signed the divorce papers, continuously sneaking glances at me throughout. Later, we gathered to discuss matters like property division, but we didn't have much in terms of assets to worry about. In reality, he often splurged on his hobbies. Not only did he play games at home, but he also seemed to have spent a significant amount of money at game centers. Although he had previously complained about my spending habits, it turned out that he was the one with the more reckless financial behavior. The concept of saving money was non-existent for him. He hadn't saved any money since before we got married, and nothing had changed even after our marriage. Consequently, we had no assets to divide. Realizing that we had no assets to split, I thought the discussion was over, but Jones insisted it wasn't, pointing to a passbook with a considerable amount of savings and suggesting we divide that as well. However, this savings account was not subject to property division. "This is the savings I accumulated before our marriage, so it is not subject to property division," I told him, watching as his face turned progressively paler. Even then, my husband exclaimed, "Oh yeah, this condo would be part of the property division, wouldn't it? I've been living here too, after all." To him, I delivered the harsh reality. "Unfortunately, the condo is in my name, so you have no rights to it. Moreover, I've already put it up for sale, so you can't live here anymore. It would be a nuisance, so please leave immediately," I told him with a smile. Besides, I thought this condo would become too small in the future, so I had been saving up for a new home. Before marrying Jones, saving was a hobby of mine, so even with a regular job, I had managed to save quite a bit. I had used those savings to buy this condo during a time of rapid advancement, which means I had a substantial amount of property. With even the funds from selling the condo, I could build a decent house in downtown. Of course, all this property was acquired during my single days, so it won't be a subject for the property division this time. It seems he wasn't aware of that. He seemed to think he could get half of my assets. What a shame. Upon realizing that he wouldn't be part of the asset division, my husband was in a state of shock. Afterwards, we continued discussing, but he couldn't recover from his shock. Since there wasn't much to talk about anymore, the discussion ended quickly, and I submitted the divorce papers at the city office. Our divorce was finalized without a hitch. A few months later, I went back to my parents' home, and with their support gave birth to a healthy baby boy named Ethan, a name borrowed from the Bible. Now I spend fulfilling days with my loving child and parents. Of course, I haven't informed Jones and Company because if I do, I'm sure Carol would barge in demanding, "Give back my grandchild." On the other hand, Jones, who was evicted from the condo, went back to his parents' home but seemed to have become a recluse due to the shock of the easy agreement to the divorce. Occasionally, when he goes out, his appearance seems so suspicious that he often gets stopped by the police. It seems quite pitiful. I heard later that the reason he quit his job was due to issues with interpersonal relationships. Apparently, he had a bad mouth even at the office and was especially disliked by female employees, eventually being ignored by everyone. Unable to withstand such circumstances, he suddenly quit his job one day. He might have been that kind of person even before our marriage. He was only kind in front of me, an utterly deceptive man. 3 years later, I am working as the manager of a craft store. Around the time I became a regular at a local craft store, the owner approached me. "I'm getting old and thinking of retiring. If it's all right with you, would you like to take over this store?" I was proposed by the owner. At that time, my parents were actively helping with childcare, so I had quite a bit of free time and was thinking it might be nice to have a job to keep my hands busy. Besides, if I refused, this store would close, inconveniencing many regular customers. With that thought, I decided to take over the store. Today, as I was serving the occasional regular customer, an unexpected visitor came to see me. Yes, those unexpected visitors were Carol and Jones. "Well, a pretty nice store for you, huh?" "Yeah, Mom. Look, this fabric seems to suit you." Annoyed by their transparent flattery, I asked, "So what brings you here?" Then Carol says something incomprehensible. "Give my grandchild back to me." It seems Carol somehow heard that I had given birth and is considering making the child the heir. "You were already pregnant when I proposed divorce. Why did you keep it a secret?" "If I had known, I wouldn't have gone through with the divorce." Jones started blaming me. Well, I obviously kept quiet because I wanted the divorce. I knew you guys would use any means necessary to prevent the divorce if you found out I was pregnant. I retorted, glaring at Jones and Carol. Then she said, "So are you giving back my grandchild or not?" "I want to live with my grandchild as soon as possible." "You have had enough time, haven't you? You have been together for 3 years, so hand over the child to me," once again making an absurd statement. As I stood there flabbergasted, my parents and Ethan appeared, asking, "What's the matter? Is there a problem?" It seems they rushed over after being notified by a regular customer. Then Carol, seeing Ethan holding hands with my parents, approached him saying, "Oh, how cute. He looks just like Jones when he was a child. Look, I'm your grandma." I tried to stop her, but there was no need. Ethan declared, "I only have one grandma," and hugged my mother. Therefore, my mother asked her to leave. But Jones tried to forcibly take Ethan away from my parents, yelling, "Just give the kid to my mother." I stood in front of him to protect Ethan, but being weak, I couldn't stop a grown man and was easily pushed aside. "Ethan, watch out." Jones was just a few inches away from grabbing Ethan's arm. But then, Jones was sent flying into the air. I looked up to see my father, who had just executed a perfect shoulder throw. Yes, my father had thrown him off at the last moment. My father, a police officer, was skilled in martial arts and had even competed in national championships during his student days. Jones, who knew nothing about this, couldn't utter a word due to the pain and looked at my father with a pathetic face. Well, if you intend to bother my child and grandchild any further, I'm ready to take necessary actions. What do you want to do? My father asked, showing his police badge to Carol, who turned pale and ran away, dragging Jones with her. I don't know what became of Carol and Jones after that. And honestly, I don't want to know. Several years later, Ethan began aspiring to become a police officer, looking up to my father. When I grow up, I'm going to be a police officer too. That way I can protect Mom, he says, working hard in his studies to achieve his goal. Under my father's guidance, Ethan's martial arts skills have become unbeatable among his peers. I plan to continue watching over my wonderfully grown son. Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. If you resonated with the content, please leave a positive rating and a comment. I have always adored my grandparents since I was little. A typical grandma and grandpa's girl. Probably because my parents were often away for work, I got to spend a lot of time with my grandparents. My name is Hilda, 31 years old. I'm expecting to give birth soon. Incidentally, I'm in my final month of pregnancy. I was excited about having my first child, but it wasn't like I had no concerns. The source of my worries was my husband, Owen, 32 years old. I've been gradually feeling him becoming more irritable recently. This is what they call digital caregiving. He raised his voice at my grandparents' house. He was setting up the Wi-Fi in their house, but he seemed frustrated and bothered. Initially, my grandparents didn't even need Wi-Fi. So as a couple, we visit their house occasionally. But since we can't watch the paid movie site that we usually watch to kill time there, he always complains about it. Despite them paying out of their own pocket to get Wi-Fi installed for him, he finds fault even in the installation process. I'm sorry, goggles and columns? We don't really understand. My grandmother was flustered by Owen's irritation. It's not goggles, it's Google. Not columns, it's Chrome. Saying so, he clicked his tongue loudly. I understand why he is irritated, but it leaves me with a feeling I can't quite put into words. Somehow or other, the installation was completed. This is seriously worse than physical caregiving. It's the nasty kind of digital caregiving, okay? You know there are computer classes for the elderly, right? Learn from someone else there, just like hiring a professional helper for real caregiving. He made a sarcastic comment and said I'm unnecessarily tired. I'm going to the beach and left for his hobby of surfing. He didn't used to be this rude and short-tempered, I believe. Afterwards, he became gruff even at our home and started to go surfing to vent his anger whenever something ticked him off. In the meantime, I, who am in my final month of pregnancy, am left behind, and his attitude feels like he's taking it out on me, leaving me feeling helpless. I vent my frustrations at my grandparents' house. Your husband might be feeling like the baby in your belly is taking you away from him. The reason I love my grandparents is that they give advice based on their life experience. That's how it felt one day when I visited them. As it became evening and I was about to leave, my grandmother said, "It must be tough doing household chores while pregnant. Take this with you." I made it and gave me some mac and cheese. When I served that dish for dinner at home, his complaints flew out again. Ignoring that, I rubbed my belly. I'm experiencing more frequent kicks and severe back pain. Above all, my belly feels heavy. My grandmother gave it to me, considering my condition, but it wasn't just that. Also, you're always out. But are you really going to Grandma and Grandpa's? What is that about? Bringing home mac and cheese should be evidence enough. That's what I thought, but just like there's prenatal depression for pregnant women, according to my grandmother, there might be something going on with him as well. The outdated dishes are seriously unbearable. It feels like the 80s era. I'm going surfing. I'll eat some pasta or something on the way back, he said, and left again. I sat on a chair alone, letting out a sigh. Surfing on a night like this. But maybe seeing the cute baby will change something in him. I also had a faint hope, because my grandmother said babies make the world go round. But I would come to know with my own body that it was a naive hope after giving birth. I gave birth at the end of that month. It was a long haul with 7 hours of labor and 3 hours in the delivery room, fitting for a first-time mom. I think I did pretty well, but it was truly painful. However, seeing the baby's face made all the pain irrelevant. Even though very small, the baby had the form of a human down to the fingertips. I felt freed from all the hardships. I wish my maternity blues could fly away, and his blues could disappear as well. But he didn't come to the hospital even once to see the baby's face while I was admitted. Far from it. When I returned home from the hospital, he questioned, "Is that really my child?" Considering you often left home, claiming to visit your grandparents, I find it hard to believe. Then, as I stood dumbfounded at the doorstep holding the baby, he coldly stated, "Give me some of your hair. I need to get a DNA test done to confirm if it's really your child." Where did that come from? I've just returned home after enduring the pain of childbirth. Is it fair to pick on me like this? I felt a surge of anger like I've never experienced before. Is he accusing me of infidelity? More than being suspected by him, what irritates me is Owen showing not even a shred of joy in front of such a cute baby. I felt my anger rising like magma erupting from a volcano. If the feeling of finding the baby adorable comes from maternal instincts, it felt like my very maternity was being negated. This is just awful. The next day, having reached my limit, I poured out my grievances to my grandparents, who came to check on the baby. My grandfather, perhaps trying to support me, suggested from a male perspective, "If you haven't done anything wrong, why not take the DNA test? Women can hold their heads high if they are innocent, but men sometimes can't. Believe without evidence. Sharing objective facts is important. Well, if this clears the suspicion, instead of holding a grudge against Owen, ask him to make it up to you with a nice cake or something." This helped to calm me down a bit. So submitted my hair for the DNA test. I haven't done anything wrong. If this resolves things amicably, then so be it. I convinced myself. However, a week later, "Hey, the test result, it seems it's not my child. What's the meaning of this?" Owen slammed a paper with the test results in front of me. I got it done at the Adams Clinic. I stared at the paper in shock. Indeed, it confirmed the absence of any genetic match with him. "This is the evidence. Adultery, do you understand?" he announced with a triumphant face. I really have no memory of it. I visited my grandparents' house with the paper in hand and cried in their embrace. After a brief silence, my grandfather spoke gently. "Hilda, you used to come to our house when you were in trouble, didn't you? It's okay. Leave the rest to me." He gently patted my shoulder with his wrinkled but big hand and then stroked the baby's head. The yet-to-close fontanelle felt soft. Since my childhood, my grandfather always reassured me, saying, "It's okay." And he did so today as well. I shed large, heavy tears. "Thank you, Grandpa." A few days later, my grandfather called Owen to gather at their place over the weekend. "So it's finally happening. A discussion heading towards divorce, right?" He spoke arrogantly, looking down at me. He deliberately put the DNA test results he showed me earlier into a bag. Although my parents were informed about the discussion, it was decided that only the 4 of us, my grandparents, me, and him, would gather. As my grandfather said, "For now, leave it to me." When everyone gathered in the living room of my grandparents' house, he started the conversation. This is undeniable proof. He distributed copies of the DNA test results to everyone. Indeed, it stated that there was no blood relation with him. As everyone looked at the paper, my grandfather confirmed, "This is from Adams Clinic, as written here, right?" "Yes, can't you see it's mentioned here?" He is brimming with confidence. And just like a detective who has gathered all the evidence, he declared, "There's no escape, you know? As long as I have this evidence, I won't let you say I don't remember anything." He sat back with a smirk, as if he was cornering a suspect. At that moment, the grandfather chuckled ominously. Then he placed some similar-looking hair on top of the copy of the appraisal result that Owen had prepared. "This is a genuine document from Adams Hospital where the DNA test results are recorded." "Whose appraisal?" he asked the grandfather with a confused expression. "Ha ha ha ha, I had a test done to check the relationship between Grandma and her daughter. In other words, between Hilda's mother and her." "Why?" I was baffled, blinking my eyes in confusion. "Take a good look, Hilda." The grandfather grinned. Compare this DNA report with the one he brought. The format, the style of the document is completely different. When I reflexively looked at him, beads of sweat were forming on his forehead. The grandfather began to explain. When he helped me set up the Wi-Fi, he sarcastically suggested that I should attend a computer class for old folks. Feeling slighted, I decided to attend one where I met a doctor from Adams Hospital. No way, being acquainted with an appraiser? Truth is stranger than fiction, huh? When I saw the appraisal result that Hilda brought, I wondered why it was done at Adams Hospital instead of the Harris Maternity Clinic where Hilda gave birth. I assumed that if it was the maternity clinic, they would have conducted the test using Hilda's saliva, so there couldn't be any mistake. As the grandfather spoke up to this point, his eyes were already floating in disbelief. So when I asked the doctor at Adams Hospital, he said that your granddaughter hasn't taken any tests here. After further discussions with the doctor, he suggested that Hilda's mother may have had the test done at a different hospital. So he began to tremble. This is forgery of private documents. The doctor at Adams Hospital was furious. You should prepare for some serious repercussions. I'm sorry, Owen finally teared up. It was reckless. I never thought I'd get caught. What do you mean you never thought? That makes it even more unforgivable. The grandfather sharply reprimanded him. Please, please. He begged for forgiveness, bringing his hands together and rubbing his head on the table. I have no intention of forgiving you. I want to make this a tale to take to the grave. So I'll tell you how I uncovered the lie. The roles of the detective and the suspect reversed. Listening to Hilda's claim, I decided to investigate using the computer skills I recently acquired. And what I found was the grandfather brought out the computer and turned it on and logged in. With practiced movements, he double-clicked an icon. With this? Google Chrome, right? It's Google Chrome, actually. Somewhere, my grandparents were performing a heard-before comedic routine. I did an image search for DNA test certificate, and no way, the very first image that came up was identical to the document that my husband initially showed me. He told me to attend a computer class, and there I learned about image search. The arrogant remarks he had thrown at the grandfather had come back to haunt him. Now, naturally, we're curious about the motive behind this forgery. The grandfather thrust a bundle of papers towards him, who was sobbing with a runny nose. I hacked into your computer. Hacking? It wasn't just him who shouted, I did too. No, to be precise, I snooped into your computer. The one in your room. How? The password must be 4646433? Huh? He started moving his mouth in astonishment. How did you know that? I heard it from a retired cop I met in a computer class. The surfers around this area mostly use 4644633 as their PIN. 46463, I exclaimed in realization. Yes, it means going off dot. The senior network at the computer class is something to be feared. So I tried inputting it on a whim, and lo and behold, I got access just like that. And then, Grandpa continues, cracking the PIN is impressive, but there's more? I find myself getting excited about Grandpa's rapid progress with the computer. You know, when you look at the timeline on Google Maps, it shows all of your activity history. His sweat is now dripping from his chin onto the table. The ink on the fake DNA test report is smudging. So I investigated, and just so you know, this wasn't taught in class. I found this method by searching tirelessly to protect my precious grandchild. I searched for all the days when Hilda came to vent and the days you went surfing. I was shocked. All the destinations were shady motels. Here's the printed proof. Grandpa slammed a stack of papers onto the table. But this alone won't be enough, don't you think? Ready to confess? No, I can't. If you say no, then... Ignoring Owen, Grandpa brought over a tablet. I borrowed all the data saved on your computer. Allowing messages to be viewed on the computer backfired on you. Flirting with this woman called Mally. I've transferred all that data onto this tablet. The tablet screen that Grandpa opened was flooded with evidence of infidelity. Messages like Hotel Lagoon. It was nice. And I really want us to be a real couple soon with a winky face. By the way, the icon for Mally isn't a photo. I've got hold of the photos exchanged in the messages, too. He couldn't say a thing anymore. It was you who told me to go to the computer class, wasn't it? How dare you neglect your heavily pregnant wife at such a delicate time? Realize the despicable act you have committed as a man. You do not deserve to be the father of my precious great-grandchild. You framed Hilda for cheating and hurt her, and you used your own child as an excuse to have fun with your mistress. It is absolute and disgraceful. You deserve to be punished. He could only bow down in submission. Adding insult to injury, Grandpa said, I have copied the forged data from the DNA test report you created as evidence of your criminal activity. This has rendered you completely incapacitated. Therefore, I have decided to divorce you immediately after giving birth. However, I have received a substantial amount of compensation for your adultery, and of course from your mistress as well. I have also made you pay child support in a lump sum. So, financially, I am now comfortable, and I am considering finding a daycare for my child to attend soon. As the saying goes, when the money is gone, so is the relationship. And this was exactly the case with you and your mistress. I was bombarded with crying emails from Owen saying I am broke and the woman has left me, please take me back, but I promptly blocked him. More importantly, you are being sued by Adam's clinic for forging private documents. There's no way I could ever reconcile with someone like you. Meanwhile, my child has been lovingly welcomed by my grandparents, and recently they have started to laugh at the sound of the bell when hitting a stuffed roly-poly toy with their fist. Children grow up so quickly. She looks just like Grandma, doesn't she? Grandpa says, no way, she is going to be even more beautiful than me. Grandma laughs and says, let's take pictures and make a photo movie. A baby's face changes every day. Grandpa, in a good mood, heads to his beloved computer. Thank you, Grandpa and Grandma. I love you both so much. Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. If you enjoyed the content, please leave a positive rating and a comment. That kid isn't mine, is it? No way, that can't be. My husband showed the DNA test report aggressively, and I denied it, playing the victim. You've really done it now. We're getting a divorce, and you're going to pay a hefty amount for emotional distress. My husband said this with a smug, self-satisfied smile. However, a few days later, his true colors were revealed by the real DNA test report. My name is Rosa Miller. I've been married for 6 months, still very much in the honeymoon phase. I met Carl, my husband, at work, and we got married when I became pregnant. It was a shotgun wedding, so to speak. Since it was before our wedding, neither of us had plans for children. We even considered abortion, fearing opposition for having a child before marriage. However, this child who came against all odds, even with contraception, felt like a miracle. Thinking about it made me love the baby even more, feeling it was fate. I persuaded Carl, saying, please, I want to have this baby. I want you to be by my side as a father. But this is a shotgun wedding. It's kind of embarrassing, isn't it, given that we haven't even talked about marriage yet? That may be, but our relationship itself isn't something to be ashamed of. People will understand. I think it's better to raise the child together, openly, instead of keeping it a secret as my belly grows. He seemed reluctant about the idea of a shotgun wedding at first, but eventually chose to marry me. I was worried he would be full of complaints, but the wedding preparations progressed smoothly. And as planned, we informed our workplace early on about the pregnancy, along with our marriage announcement. Both our boss and colleagues supported us wholeheartedly. Carl too seemed to be well received for his responsible and mature actions and didn't seem to mind it. Especially our boss, Scott, who helped us immensely with his thoughtful gestures. He reduced my physical tasks and supported the smooth transition of roles and responsibilities within the team. So I will be starting my maternity leave from tomorrow. I appreciate your understanding and support during my absence. On the last day before my maternity leave, I addressed my team at work. Encouraged by their supportive words, I responded with a smile. As everyone resumed their tasks, Scott called me aside. Working under his calm and composed demeanor always felt reassuring. Thank you for working until today, despite the difficulty in moving around. Please take care and have a safe delivery. Thank you. Are you all right? You seem a bit pale. I flinched. I couldn't disguise my worry in time, prompting Scott to continue the conversation. Your husband seems to be busier than ever, isn't he? Indeed, Carl, who worked in a different department, was busier than ever, even more so recently. Some colleagues even appreciated him for being the breadwinner, saying it was a good thing. However, the situation at home was far from pleasant. Though we managed to go from courting to marriage, the post-marriage life was not as I imagined. Carl was cold. He sighed in irritation, seeing me suffer from morning sickness, and visibly got irritated when household chores lagged. From the time we discovered the pregnancy, his indifference and coldness seemed to have increased. He seemed entirely disinterested in the pregnancy and the baby. Contrasting my transformation into a mother, Carl showed no signs of developing a sense of responsibility as a father. Our marriage had turned cold. I had to work outside, and at home, I had no choice but to act like a maid. Gradually, even my affection for Carl vanished. I even started to detest his idleness at home. And then I completed my delivery. It took a long while after the labor pains started, but both I and baby are safe. I was truly relieved when I heard the baby's first cries, and I was so happy I could cry when I touched the baby's skin afterwards. The nurse laid the baby beside me while I was sleeping. The baby was still red and soft, but irresistibly cute. "Hey, Carl, she's really cute, isn't she?" "Yeah." Carl was sitting on a chair nearby, playing with his smartphone and giving me an absent-minded reply. He didn't even look at our child. He didn't even take a picture with the smartphone he held. It wasn't that I hadn't imagined this happening, but I was truly disappointed in Carl this time, being cold even to his own flesh and blood. At this point, it's infuriating. In the middle of this, the nurse came to check on us, so I had a little chat with her. Eventually, when the baby started crying, Carl left his seat without a word and then left. Carl never visited after that, and I desperately learned to take care of the baby. I had some health issues which extended my stay in the hospital. Aside from that, I was discharged without any problems and returned home. There were many shoes at the entrance. Thinking we had visitors, I entered the living room, and there sat my in-laws with stern faces, even though they hadn't visited me. Carl, who was beside them, was grinning smugly for some reason, which was creepy. "Eh? What's going on?" I couldn't hide my confusion, and I clenched the arm holding the baby tighter. To me, Carl raised his voice. To me, "That child isn't mine, is it?" The room fell silent. The in-laws were glaring at me, clearly not on my side. Why would he say such a thing? I felt dizzy from the confusion and the lingering fatigue. "Wait, what do you mean?" "This child is genuinely yours." I looked at the table and saw a paper labeled DNA Paternity Test Report. I scanned the unfamiliar format for the results section. Parent-child relationship denied. That can't be. It's impossible. The test results wouldn't lie. Even if you're not the father, why do you think I insisted on marrying you? Ignoring my protest, Carl continued to grin with a complacent attitude. I knew the test result was a mistake, but why could he take such an attitude? Now the in-laws were yelling. "We thought it was strange for you to have a shotgun wedding. So this was the reason, you shameless woman. Get a divorce. Divorce Carl. We didn't know you were such a brazen woman." "I swear it's not true. I wouldn't do such a foolish thing. We can't consider that child as our grandchild. We want to sever ties now." "Really? She's not cute at all. She looks exactly like Rosa and someone we don't know, huh?" "It's not true. This child is..." Not just me, but they were hurling abuse at my newborn child as well. My heart felt more torn than ever before. It's so difficult to prove something I didn't do. As for the baby's facial features, I can't clearly say she looks like either Carl or me now. Unable to argue or insist any further, all I could do was cry pitifully amidst being cornered. A hint of doubt crosses the rational part of my mind. Is this appraisal document real? With a grandiose sigh, Carl got up from his seat. "You've really done it now. We're getting a divorce, and you're gonna pay alimony. Understand?" My in-laws also got up to leave, continuing to glare at me and the child as usual. I can't stand it anymore. In my jumbled mind, I desperately searched for an escape. In reality, my relationship with my parents and relatives is distant. I'm not even sure if I can rely on them. Please allow me some time to think. Unable to see a clear way forward, I picked up the bag I had set down once more. Nobody except for me seemed to care about the crying baby. I staggered out of the house, heading towards the station. Despite it still being bright outside, my spirit was utterly dark. Now I'm at my parents' house, a place I hadn't visited since I announced my marriage. I had informed them that the baby was born safely. The voice of my mom on the other end of the phone didn't show any particular excitement, only offering a formal reply of well done. After being practically kicked out by Carl and my in-laws, I realized I couldn't live in a regular hotel. In desperation, I called my family home, and then my dad came to pick me up in the car. Tears welled up inexplicably at a sight I hadn't seen since he used to pick me up from tutoring classes. My parents had been strict, especially when it came to academics. Every day they rigorously managed study hours and set goals. When I started to rebel as a high schooler and it became clear that my plans and desired schools weren't going according to their wishes, they let me go. Finding this convenient, I moved out as soon as I enrolled in college. I managed to get my grandparents to provide some startup funds and scraped by on my earnings from part-time jobs. The sudden return home after maintaining such a distance was unexpected, but my parents didn't blame me. While primarily taking care of my baby, they also helped with meals and laundry, occasionally coming to check on the baby. Might not have been a typical homecoming, but having a place to sleep brought a considerable amount of relief. However, even now, I see that scene in my dreams. Being scorned as a loose woman leads to the worst kind of awakening. Near the end of my rope due to exhaustion and mental strain, a message of concern came from a colleague. Apparently, rumors about Carl and me were swirling at the office. Particularly, Carl himself had told a colleague that Rosa had an affair and gave birth to that child, and it seems sympathy was gathering around Carl. However, people in my department think the affair might be a hoax. They believe in my innocence. Moreover, I received a call from my boss, Scott. When I tried explaining the situation and my current concerns, he responded, "Yeah, I've heard those rumors. Many parts seem strange to me. But anyhow, I and everyone else don't believe that you would do such a thing." His polite words contained an underlying strength, and I thought that maybe Scott was angered on my behalf. I knew I could trust Scott. I decided to consult him earnestly. I haven't cheated. This child is Carl's. I want to prove it somehow. Well, how about doing a DNA test again? Also, you might want to hire a detective agency to investigate your husband. If budget is a concern, I will assist you. I initially declined, stating that it was too much, but Scott reassured me that he would definitely help. Tears flowed as I expressed my gratitude. With determination, I decided to follow his suggestion. 1 week after arriving at my parents' house, I left my baby in their care and went to a meeting with Carl and the in-laws. Carl seemed smug and confident, while the in-laws appeared hesitant to be there. So, let's start by discussing the amount you owe us, shall we? But before that, I have a request. I want to have a DNA test done again, but this time with blood instead of hair. Let's go to the hospital right now. What? We've already done the test once. That should be sufficient. You saw the results, didn't you? It showed a 99.9% chance that I am not the father. You can't dispute that now. Trying to revisit this to avoid paying alimony is really low, you know. Why are you resisting so much? Are you implying that the appraisal document is a forgery? Carl's complexion changed, and I couldn't tell if it was due to anger or agitation. If we go to the hospital together, they can take the samples on the spot so there's no chance of fraud. And if we do the test again and the previous result was accurate, there shouldn't be any issue. I will cover all the costs. Or are you planning to run away, knowing that it will make you look suspicious? My in-laws took the bait this time. Carl, that sounds fine. Go ahead and do it. After all, if anyone is going to end up looking bad, it's this woman. Yes, the results won't change anyway. We are on your side, you know? Carl's demeanor had already lost the composure it had at the beginning of our conversation. While staring at a point on the table, he said quietly, "All right then." From there, accompanied by the in-laws, Carl and I went to the hospital. Even though I knew I was innocent, I waited anxiously for the reevaluation results. A few days later, the results arrived. The probability of me being the father is over 99.9%, seems. I flaunted the test report. Despite the anticipated outcome, I felt somewhat relieved. Carl and the in-laws, who had gathered just like before, were looking at the results with pale faces. Thinking that my father-in-law was shaking nervously, he suddenly stood up and shook Carl's shoulder. "What is going on, Carl? Were you lying? What happened to the previous test results? Are you really parent and child? What is going on?" Carl, who was silent and looking down. This time my father-in-law, who was turning bright red with anger. My mother-in-law, who started crying, was overwhelmed. "Will you explain?" Prompted by me, Carl finally slumped his shoulders. The previous test result was a fake. He had secretly taken a hair sample from a friend and sent it in, pretending it was his own. He married to save face in front of parents and co-workers, even though he didn't really want to. He didn't want to be the guilty party in a divorce, so he wanted to paint me as the bad one, get sympathy from others, and even receive alimony. When Carl finished speaking in bits and pieces, the in-laws were stunned for a while. Aside from the verbal abuse they showered upon me and my child, it was a natural reaction since they had trusted their son so much. But you didn't have to go this far. Even though we have a child, why did you even think of divorce? Carl fell silent again. Instead, I put something on the table. You were seeing someone else, weren't you? But it became inconvenient when I became pregnant, didn't it? What was revealed through the detective agency's investigation was that Carl had been having an affair with a co-worker at the company. Their relationship had continued since the time he was dating me. Basically, he was two-timing. Even after getting married, the relationship didn't end and seemed to have continued secretly. I'm sorry. After squeezing out those words, Carl started crying, sniffling, and sobbing. Although I was the one who should be crying, I couldn't shed any more tears. Let's get a divorce, but you will be the one paying the alimony. Also, don't think you can go back to your old life now because your bosses and co-workers will know about this. Once I inform the bosses and co-workers, the word will spread on its own. Next, I faced my in-laws. Dad and Mom, I believe you now understand the truth. That child is genuinely mine and Carl's. He is your grandchild connected by blood. My in-laws had placed their last hopes on this, holding their breaths as they stared at my face. But I will never forget the verbal abuse from that time. I have no intention of acknowledging you as the grandparents from now on. Not cute. As you stated yourself, please don't think of him as your grandchild anymore. Stay away for the rest of your life. As I finished speaking, they covered their faces with their hands and hung their heads. Neither Carl nor the in-laws begged any further. In the end, not a word of apology came from the in-laws. Now it was my turn to rise from my seat. It was to fetch the last of my belongings in my room. I planned to pack this up and send it to my parents' home, and then look for a new place to live. During the subsequent maternity leave, I was desperately raising the baby. As expected, the rumors of what Carl had done spread at the company, and the initial manly attitude and gathered sympathy seemed to have vanished. I got in touch with the woman he cheated with through a lawyer, and afterward, she voluntarily resigned from the company. Carl lost his credibility, his performance dropped, and he was demoted. Rumors spread everywhere, and now he endures daily backstabbing from colleagues. With alimony and child support to consider, he seems to be continuing to work while taking refuge at his parents' house. With occasional support from my parents, the baby's growing up well. It's hard with the lack of sleep, but the child's smiling face is angelic and adorable, bringing me comfort every day. The reason why my life is not just lonely and painful now is also thanks to Scott's support. Since consulting him about the paternity test, he has become more concerned about me and the baby. It started with meeting on walks and helping take care of the child a bit, but now he comes to visit at home, showering us with love and care. Seeing the two of them together like this, I felt at ease at some point. I had unknowingly come to trust Scott more than a boss, and before I realized it, I was attracted to him as a man. And then somehow, the feelings were mutual and we started dating. Rosa, if you're willing, why don't both of you live with me? I have a room too. Eh? Is that so? No, please come. I want to marry you. At this unparalleled happiness, I cried tears of joy which troubled him to a great extent. The initial married life was continuously painful and hurtful. It's not something that can be forgotten easily, but thanks to the help from those around me, I was able to attain happiness beyond that. My adorable child and the man I love. Living with the two of them, I am the happiest person alive. Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. When I said good morning, my daughter replied with a beaming smile. Mom, it's today, right? Moving day. We're going to our new home today, aren't we? Seeing her face light up with excitement, all my worries instantly melted away. I've taken care of the credit card procedures, and everything is all set. Holding my daughter's eager hand, I began to get ready. This is a personal account by Stella, 34 years old, a novelist. My name is Stella and I'm 34. I've been married to Hans for almost a decade now. We're blessed with a daughter named Mally, who's now 7. Currently, I earn my living as a novelist. I've always had a passion for writing, and once upon a time, I even won an award in a mystery novel competition. Nowadays, I juggle several monthly series and lead a hectic life. Hans and I met at a company I previously worked for. When I began making good money as a novelist, he almost simultaneously quit his job. Since then, he's been mostly lazing around at home all day. But on that day, to my surprise, he was dressed in a suit, which was unusual for him. I hadn't heard of any plans he had, so I asked him where he was headed. He looked startled for a moment, then said he was going for an interview. An interview for what kind of job? Well, obviously for a job, I have been thinking that maybe it's time for me to get back to work. That sounds great. I hope it goes well. When I made a light-hearted comment, for some reason, he looked away nervously and left the house. At that time, I genuinely believed he was going for a job interview. I had hopes that maybe he was finally taking the initiative, considering our family. However, Hans didn't come home until 2 a.m. that night. With a deadline looming, I was up late working. When I heard him come in, I went to the living room only to find him asleep on the couch, reeking of alcohol and perfume. I spotted his unlocked phone next to him and decided to check it. To my astonishment, Hans was having an affair, and the person he was seeing was my best friend Julia. The shock nearly made me faint. I tried to hold back the tears and sobs that were threatening to spill. It seems they went to a famous restaurant known for its stunning nighttime views today, but Julia is supposed to have a husband. The shock of being betrayed by the two people I trusted was overwhelming. Tears welled up naturally, and I held back my sobs with all my might. I took a moment to compose myself, being careful not to wake up Hans as I thought about my next move. Taking a deep breath, I went through the messages and transferred all the evidence of the affair to my own phone. The next morning, Hans acted as if nothing had happened. I brought up his late return, considering he said he had an interview. He evasively avoided my gaze and after pretending to recall, said, "Oh yeah, after the interview, I ran into a friend and we just hung out and had some drinks." When I asked who this friend was, he replied grumpily that I wouldn't know them, so there's no point in explaining. Hans concealed the truth about Julia. The fact that he lied indicated his guilt. One has to hide the truth only when there's something to hide. A month has passed since that day. I've been indecisive about confronting Hans about the affair. Once I bring it up, it'll undoubtedly create a rift in our marriage. If it was just me, I would have slapped the evidence in his face and asked for a divorce. But what holds me back is our daughter Mally. Taking a father away from a 7-year-old daughter who has adored him since she was little is just too cruel. Recently, since I've been cooped up in my room working, Hans has been taking the opportunity to go out more often. But this is the perfect chance. While he's out, I can gather evidence of his affair. In his room, I found a few unfamiliar receipts. It seems he bought luxury items for women. I couldn't find any of those items in his room. Of course, I didn't receive any of them. That means he must have already given them to someone else. Yes, Hans had been buying branded items for Julia. But here's the big question. How does an unemployed guy like him have that kind of money? The allowance I give him every month just doesn't add up, no matter how you slice it. Curious, I decided to follow him. I'd probably be away from home for about half a day. I asked my brother Rick to look after Mally. I didn't want Rick to know about Hans's affair, so I lied to Rick. Rick seemed suspicious of my sudden request to look after Mally, so I told him I just really wanted to go shopping alone today. Don't you always shop online? Yeah. But today I want to get something that's store exclusive. Alright, but don't be out too late. Mally gets lonely. Thanks to Rick's help, I was able to tail Hans successfully. There was Hans arm in arm with my best friend Julia. Seeing the two of them together made my heart ache. They went happily into a luxury brand store, probably buying another gift. But what shocked me even more came after. Seeing the credit card Hans used to pay gave me chills. It took me a moment to realize. It was the secondary card that I kept. I always keep my main card in my wallet, but the secondary one was in a drawer at home. Hans had secretly taken and used it. For the past few months, I hadn't used that secondary card, and I'd only checked the drawer a few times. And lately, with work equipment and furniture, I've been shopping a lot with my main card. Both the secondary and main cards pull from the same bank account. Because I was so busy, I never noticed the irregular withdrawals. On top of the shock of the affair, this additional betrayal had me shaking. All feelings of love for Hans had vanished. I know it's partly my fault for not noticing, but I can't forgive him. I took pictures of their affair and went home. From then on, I kept thinking about how to get back at him. I checked his usual computer when he wasn't around. It synced with his smartphone, so I could see his conversations with Julia in real time. I found out they planned a 4-day, 3-night trip to Hawaii. I knew their itinerary. It's the perfect chance for the revenge I've been thinking about. But there's one thing I need to consider, Mally. It'd be hard to execute my plan without letting Mally know about Hans's affair, so I sought Rick's help again. I asked him if he could look after Mally for the entire 4 days. All 4 days? Yes, I have some stuff to take care of. Stuff, huh? Rick's tone suggested he was onto something. As I was pondering how to respond, Rick bluntly said, "Stella, don't try to handle this on your own." Hans is cheating, isn't he? I was speechless. Regaining my composure, I asked Rick how he knew. He said he heard from Mally. While Mally may not understand what cheating means, she noticed that her father was close with a woman other than her mom, and she sensed this was hurting me. I always tried to act cheerful around Mally, controlling my emotions, but according to Rick, Mally could see the hurt in me and she'd likely know who caused it. What are you planning to do? Stay with him? If we get a divorce, I think Mally will be devastated. Just as I mumbled that, Mally, who was supposed to be in the next room, appeared. It's okay. Mom, I'm on your side. I don't want to be with someone who makes you sad. As long as I have you, I'm good. I have such a supportive family. Holding back tears, I expressed my gratitude to Mally and Rick multiple times. Thanks to the two of them, my resolve to take revenge on Hans was solidified. On the day Hans planned to sneak off on the trip, my child and I began preparations to move. We got Rick's help to pack while Hans was away, and on the eve of our departure, I gave my husband one last chance. Hans was in his room preparing for his trip tomorrow. He looked excited and seemed to be packing with joy. When I asked about his luggage, he said he was going on a trip with some friends, starting tomorrow. A trip? Did you mention this before? No, it was a last-minute plan. It's all within my monthly allowance, so it's all good. He was emitting a don't ask any further vibe, but that wouldn't work on me anymore. I confronted him with an intensity I'd never shown before. Hey, are you really going with just friends? Hans was visibly shaken, his face tense, but he persisted in lying, insisting they were just friends. Alright, just don't get carried away, okay? With that, I left his room. If he had been honest at that moment, I would have opted for a divorce, but I tried to end things amicably. Even if he did cheat, he was someone I once loved, and we had many good memories. But after being betrayed like this, there's no way I can forgive him. It's time to end our relationship for my future and for Mally's. There's no need to hold back with Hans, who kept lying. The next morning, Hans had already left. I opened the drawer, and after confirming he took my credit card as usual, I quickly called the credit card company to report it lost and to have it deactivated. Then Mally woke up. When I greeted her good morning, she excitedly exclaimed, "Mom, today's the day, right?" Moving day. We're going to our new home today, right? Seeing her sparkling eyes, all my worries and frustrations melted away. All right, the credit card's taken care of, and now let's move to our new place. Zay! Can't wait for a new home. With Rick's help, our move went smoothly. While my and Mally's belongings were taken to the new place, I had Hans's stuff delivered somewhere special. The next day, as I was relaxing with Mally and Rick in our new home, I received a call from Hans. Listen, it's turning out to be more expensive than I thought. Can you wire me some money? I knew this would happen. The card was disabled and he was struggling to pay for things on his trip. Without mentioning the card directly, I slipped. He slyly asked for money. I told him I couldn't spare any and refused to send it. Come on, if you don't, I'll be the one not enjoying the trip. Only one? Don't you mean two? Caught off guard by my question, he stammered. You wanted to show Julia all the best places, huh? Too bad the card you took from me is no longer usable, so give it up. Pretending as if he knew nothing about Julia and the card, Hans played dumb, but the panic in his voice was unmistakable. I already know about you and Julia. No, it's not like that. I was beyond livid with my husband's continued attempts to lie. I let out all my pent-up anger, not caring that Rick and Mally were around. Stop making excuses. You, with a family, got involved with another woman, and you used my card. Do you realize how low that is? I was seething with anger. I hope you and that homewrecker fall to the pits of hell. Never show your face in front of me and Mally again. I hung up abruptly. Then the phone rang again, this time from Julia. Listen up, Stella. What the hell have you done? Did you send Hans's stuff to my place? That's right. I sent all of Hans's belongings to Julia's house, addressed to her husband. I included a detailed letter explaining everything. Julia was livid, yelling over the phone. What the hell, Stella? My husband found out and he's furious. I told her I cheated because I'm married, but her anger didn't subside. How could you, my best friend, do something so disgusting? I totally misjudged you. That should be my line. You, my trusted friend, were having an affair with my husband. How could you think I'd forgive that? She quickly said it wasn't an affair, just a fling. She belittled Hans, saying there's no way she'd seriously date a jobless loser. But whether it was serious or just a fling doesn't matter to me. I told her I intended to divorce. I will never forgive you. Expect a hefty claim for damages. Whoa, hold on. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I can't afford to pay damages. Her pleading didn't change my mind. I told her that just because she's a housewife and can't afford to pay doesn't mean I don't want the money. I doubt Julia's husband would step up to pay for her. It might seem cold-hearted towards my best friend, but she should face the consequences of her actions. I promptly hung up and blocked her. Afterwards, I went through a lawyer to finalize my divorce and demanded compensation from both Hans and Julia. From Hans, I also demanded child support and reimbursement for the credit card charges he racked up without my permission. I heard Julia is now in debt from the compensation. She faced her own divorce and was reportedly kicked out of her house. She apparently tried to go back to her parents' house, but they turned her away when they found out about the affair. Now she's supposedly working a nighttime job. Where she lives on site, Hans initially relied on Julia, but she blamed him for causing her own divorce and cut ties with him. Currently, he's juggling multiple part-time jobs and living a physically demanding life. Hans had been unemployed for a while, but now he is working hard. It may not be easy for him to find a decent job, but he has not missed any payments for damages or child support. If he ever does, I plan to use every means necessary to collect. As for me, I am living peacefully with my daughter Mally in our new home. Mally is growing up fast, and I am constantly learning from her. I plan to continue living a life full of love without ever letting her down. Thank you for watching the video until the end. If you resonated with the content, please leave a positive rating and a comment.